The silence that fell over the Valoran system was deeper than before the battle. It was not a peaceful silence. It was the quiet after a great storm, heavy with the memory of thunder. The last swarm command node, a pulsing, brain-like orb the size of a city, had been pinpointed by Commander Sujin's analysis. A single torpedo from the Gyeongbokgung, fired on Captain Park's order, shot across the void and turned it into a slowly expanding cloud of frozen organic matter. With its brain gone, the swarm body died. The remaining ships stopped moving. Some crashed into each other. Others drifted, lifeless husks. The black tide had receded, leaving behind a sea of wreckage glittering Valoran crystal and grotesque, swarm carapace floating together. The human fleet was battered. The Bulgukso was gone. The Hwasong and Gyeongbokgung were scarred with acid burns and kinetic damage, their armor pitted and blackened. But their engines still hummed. Their lights still glowed. Immediately, the human mission changed. The warships became hospitals and rescue stations. The logistics carrier Jirison, which had hung back, now moved forward. Its hangar bays opened, not releasing fighters, but shuttles loaded with medical teams, engineers, and prefabricated shelters. On the Valoran homeworld. The sun broke through the gray haze of atmospheric combat. It shone on the crystal canyon where Sergeant Choi Han's squad had made their stand. The humans in their heavy armor were now helping, not fighting. They carefully lifted fallen crystal structures to free trapped Valorans. Medics in lighter suits moved among the wounded, using devices that seemed like magic to the Valorans, sealing cracks in their crystalline bodies and easing their pain. A human engineer, Lieutenant Kim Jun-young, sat on a piece of rubble with a portable scanner. A group of Valoran artisans gathered around him, their lights pulsing with anxious curiosity. Jun-young showed them the scan of a damaged atmospheric processor. See, the main conduit is fractured here. Your method uses phased energy to bind crystal, right? He pulled up a schematic on his pad, drawing with his finger. If we reroute the auxiliary power through this lattice, we can generate a binding field strong enough to hold it until a proper repair can grow. The Valorans stared, their lights blinking in a rapid pattern of understanding and astonishment. They had never considered using their technology in that way. To them, it was art. To the human, it was a tool to fix a problem. Together, they began to work. In orbit, the human shuttles collected the Valoran escape pods, bringing the survivors aboard the Gyeongbokgung. The Valorans, fragile and frightened, were met not by soldiers, but by calm crew members who offered them warm blankets, a concept they found strange but comforting, and nutrient gels adapted for their biology. They saw humans with bandages on their heads, arms in slings, moving slowly with the weariness of battle, yet still stopping to help them. Representative Kalen was brought aboard the flagship. He stood on the observation deck, looking out at his scarred world, at the human ships standing guard like battered sentinels. Captain Park Ji-hoon approached him. The captain's face was etched with a deep fatigue and a sorrow that sat quietly in his eyes. "Your world is safe, Representative," Ji-hoon said, his voice low. "The swarm in this system is destroyed." Kalen turned his glowing form toward the human. You lost so much. Your ship, your people." He had seen the flash of the Bulguksa's end. He understood sacrifice now, not as a concept, but as a terrible, real thing. "We did." Ji-hoon acknowledged, the words simple and heavy. "But the mission was to save your people." "We did that. Why?" Kalen asked, his light shimmering with the intensity of the question. "You did not know us. Your world is so far. It must have been so hard, so dangerous. Why come?" Ji-hoon was silent for a moment, also looking out at the stars. "A long time ago, on our world, we looked up at the dark and thought we were alone. We heard only silence. It was very lonely and very frightening. He looked back at Kalen. When we finally heard your signal, it wasn't just a call for help. It was a voice in the silence. It meant we were not alone in the dark either. How could we not answer? In the Galactic Concord Council Chamber, the gathered species had watched the entire battle. They had seen the brutality and the sacrifice. They had seen the swarm, a horror that had haunted them for generations, shattered by the newcomers. The data was still being analyzed, but one thing was clear. The galaxy had changed. The humans were not just strong. They were resilient in a way that defied logic. They could take a loss that would break another species and turn it into fuel for their resolve. They could switch from utter destruction to gentle aid in a moment. They were terrifyingly adaptable, and they were compassionate. This combination was unprecedented. The Concord felt a wave of immense gratitude, followed by a cold, slow creeping fear. What happened if these Deathworlders ever decided that they were the threat? The question hung in the silent chamber. Captain Park Ji-hoon knew the eyes of the galaxy were on him. He stood on the bridge of his wounded ship, cleaned up but still bearing the marks of battle. He opened a channel on the broad Concord frequency, the one every species would hear. His face appeared on 1,000 screens in 100 different worlds. He looked tired and honest and unwavering. People of the Galactic Concord, we are the United Nations of Earth. We heard the Valoran cry for help. We answered. We have seen the kind of darkness that exists in the void. He paused, his gaze steady. Our home is a hard world. It taught us that life is fragile and that it must be protected. It taught us that sometimes, to protect the gentle, you must be willing to face the monstrous. He let the words hang, knowing they would be translated, analyzed, and feared. So hear this. If you are peaceful, if you are in danger, call us. We will come. We will stand with you. His eyes hardened just a little. The sorrow was still there, but now it was joined by something else, a promise. But if you are the darkness, if you prey on the helpless, know this too. We are from the dark. We were born in it, and we are not afraid to return to it, to bring justice to those who hide within it. The transmission ended. On the Valoran homeworld, under the gentle sun, Sergeant Choi Hana sat with the young Valoran who had touched her armor. She showed it how to draw in the dirt with a stick. The Valoran, in turn, made light patterns in the air that mimicked the shapes. They could not speak the same language, not really. But they did not need to dock in the observation deck. Representative Kalen looked from the human captain to his recovering world. The fear was still there, a memory of the swarm, but it was now joined by a new, fragile feeling. Hope. Not a naive hope, but a hard-won one. The galaxy was not a safe place. But now, it contained beings who would fight to make it safer. The monsters from the hell world had not brought more hell. They had brought a shield, and as the human ships began the long journey home, the galaxy watched them go. They had cried for help into the darkness, and the darkness had answered, not with more night, but with a fierce and blazing dawn. The Deathworlders had arrived. Nothing would ever be the same. The battle settled into a rhythm, a brutal, grinding rhythm of metal and fire against chitin and acid. The human fleet was a fortress in the void, but the swarm was an ocean. It kept coming. The brilliant, coordinated first strikes had blunted the attack, but now it was a war of attrition, and the humans were far from home. On the bridge of the Gyeongbokgung, Captain Park Ji-hoon watched the tactical display with a stone-like face. His ships were marked in steady blue. The swarm was a seething, angry red mass that seemed to have no end. The Hwazong was reporting armor breaches on its lower decks. The Bulgus's point defense systems were overheating. Ammunition running low. Swarm Leviathan is entering weapons range of the Bulguksa. Commander Sujin reported. Her voice still calm, but now edged with tension. It's ignoring all other fire. Its biosignature is spiking. It's preparing a massive discharge. The Leviathan was the largest swarm ship they had seen, a monstrous lumpy shape like a cancerous asteroid. It was moving slowly, deliberately, toward the destroyer, absorbing the punishment from the human guns. Order the Bulgoxa to fall back, flank speed, Ji-hoon said. They're trying, Captain. The swarm has them surrounded. Their engines are damaged. On the screen, they watched the Leviathan shudder. A colossal pulse of green energy, visible even to the naked eye, erupted from its front. It wasn't a projectile. It was a wave. It washed over the Bulgoxa. Where it touched, the ship's outer armor didn't just melt. It boiled away in clouds of vapor. The destroyer's lights flickered violently. A frantic communication came through. It was the captain of the Bulgoxa, her voice crackling with static and pain. Gyeongbokgung, this is Bulgoxa. Primary power failing. Hull integrity collapsing on decks 5 through 12. We cannot stop the breach. Ji-hoon's hands clenched into fists on the armrests of his chair. He knew every person on that ship. He had served with many of them for years. Abandon ship, he ordered, his voice harsh. All hands evacuate. We will recover you. The order went out. They could see the tiny sparks of escape pods shooting away from the dying destroyer. But not enough. The swarm drones, like piranhas, descended on the pods. Swallowing them. In the main engineering bay of the Bulgoxa, chaos reigned. Fires raged. The air was filled with smoke and the shriek of tearing metal. Senior engineer Park Min-soo, covered in grime and a cut on his forehead, fought his way to a primary console. His team was gone, either evacuated or lost. A massive hull breach was spreading down the corridor toward the reactor. If it reached the core, the ship would not just die. It would take a chunk of the fleet with it. He opened a direct channel to the Gyeongbokgung. To his older brother, Captain Ji-hoon. June? His brother's voice came through, using his childhood name, fear breaking through the professional calm for the first time. Big brother, Min-soo said, his voice surprisingly steady. He coughed from the smoke. Listen, the breach is at Sector 7 Alpha. It's moving fast. I can manually seal the primary containment bulkheads from here. It will contain the blast if the core goes. No. Get to a pod, Min-soo. That's an order. The pods on this deck are gone. It's okay. Min-soo's fingers flew over the console, inputting the sealing codes. On the Gyeongbokgung's display, Commander Sujin saw the data stream in, the codes that would save the rest of the fleet from the destroyer's death throes. Her face went pale. I'm sending the codes now, Min-soo said. A terrible groan echoed through the engineering bay. The floor tilted. You have to save those people down there. The Valorans, there? They're like kids, June. They never had a chance. Min-soo. Tell Mom. Min-soo paused, his voice finally catching. He took a sharp breath. Tell Mom I finished the job. Gyeongbokgung signing off. The channel went dead. On the bridge of the flagship, there was absolute silence. Captain Park Ji-hoon did not move. He did not cry out. He simply stared at the screen where his brother's voice had been. His jaw was a hard line. After 3 seconds, he gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. Commander Sujin, her eyes glistening, immediately began acting on the data. All ships, emergency maneuver. Get clear of the Bulgoxa. Prepare for shockwave. The Bulgoxa's core went critical. It did not explode outward. The internal containment, sealed by Min-soo's last act, held just long enough to channel the fury inward and downward. The ship vanished in a silent, blinding flash of light. taking the swarm Leviathan and hundreds of its drones with it. The cost was immense. The loss of a ship, the loss of friends, the loss of a brother. On the ground, Sergeant Choi Hana's squad had linked up with more survivors. They had established a shaky perimeter around a group of several hundred Villorans huddled in a natural crystal canyon. Her plasma cannon was out of charge. She now used a heavy rifle, picking off swarm drones with precise, economical shots. A young Villoran, its form delicate and glowing a soft blue, approached her as she reloaded. It moved slowly, without fear, just a deep, aching curiosity. It reached out a thin, crystalline hand and touched the scorched, acid-pitted surface of her armor. Choi Hana went very still. She looked down at the small being. Slowly, she reached up and released the seals on her helmet with a hiss of equalizing pressure. She pulled it off. The Villoran flinched back for a second, seeing her face for the first time. Human faces, with their expressive eyes, their skin, their hair, were strange to them. But Hana's face was not fierce. It was tired, smudged with dirt and sweat, but her eyes were kind. She gave a small, weary smile. "It's okay," she said softly. The translator box repeated her words in soft, chime-like tones. The Valoran looked from her face to the smoking ruins of the drones around the canyon, then back to her face. Its own light began to pulse in a slow, questioning rhythm. "You are from the dark between stars?" It whispered through the translator. Hana nodded, following its gaze to the destruction. She understood the question. They saw the violence and assumed the source was just as dark. "Yeah," she said, her voice rough. "We are." She looked back at the Valoran, her smile returning, faint but sure. "And we brought the light." Above them, a space battle was turning. The sacrifice of the Bulguksa had created a hole in the swarm. The human ships, grieving and angry, pressed the advantage. They fought with a new, cold fury. The swarm, for the first time, began to falter. Its mindless hunger met a wall of calculated, vengeful resolve. It was not used to prey that bit back this hard. It was not used to prey that mourned its dead and fought even harder in their name. The swarm's coordination began to break down. Without the Leviathan's directing signal, the smaller units started acting erratically, attacking each other or drifting aimlessly. The humans saw the opening. They attacked the remaining command nodes with surgical precision. The tide of the battle, bought with terrible sacrifice, had finally turned. The first shot was not from the humans. A swarm vessel, shaped like a twisted thorn, discharged a glob of glowing green acid. It sailed through the vacuum, meant to splatter against a ship's hull and begin eating through it. It missed the Gyeongbokgung by kilometers. The human ship hadn't even dodged. It was already moving on a different vector, a hard, sharp turn that should have turned any Valoran pilot into paste. The Gyeongbokgung did not fire back with energy beams. Instead, a series of hatches slid open along its flanks. There was a flash of magnetic acceleration, almost invisible. A fraction of a second later, the lead swarm thorn ship simply disintegrated. A tungsten slug, moving at a speed that defied sense, had passed through it like a bullet through paper, carrying most of the ship's mass away as superheated vapor. Then another ship exploded. Then another. The human fleet moved into the swarm like a surgeon's scalpel, if the scalpel was also a sledgehammer. The destroyer Bulguksa positioned itself between the main swarm cluster and the retreating Valoran civilian ships. Its point defense network came alive. To the watching Concord probes, it looked like the ship had grown a shimmering, fiery halo. Thousands of small, rapid-fire kinetic rounds and laser bursts filled the space around it, creating a wall of shrapnel. Swarm drones, smaller and faster than the main vessels, tried to swarm the destroyer. They flew into the cloud, and were shredded into pulp, but the real spectacle was the fighters. Reaper Squadron, 12 ships, dove into the thickest part of the swarm. They did not fly in elegant formations. They fought like a wolf pack, or like hornets whose nest had been kicked. They used gravity wells, debris, and even the bulk of larger swarm ships to slingshot around, firing in short. Brutal bursts. Kim Tae-shik, calcined badger, pulled his craft into a climb so tight his vision tunneled, and the synthetic gravity generator groaned in protest. A swarm drone, like a metallic beetle, tried to latch onto his back. He cut his main thrusters, flipped his ship end over end, and fired his forward plasma cannons as he spun, carving the drone in half. He didn't cheer. He grunted, checking his shields and ammunition count. "Fox, you clear?" "Clear, Badger." Minji's voice came back, steady. "They're slow to turn. They're used to chasing, not being chased." On the bridge of the Gyeongbokgung, Commander Su-jin narrated the chaos in a calm monotone. Swarm Central Mass is attempting to envelop the Hwasong. They're ignoring its weapons fire to get within acid range. Captain Ji-hoon watched the tactical display. The artillery cruiser Hwasong was pouring missile fire into the swarm, creating massive explosions. But the swarm of smaller vessels was getting closer, like insects drawn to a light. "Tell the Hwasong to execute Plan Ghost." The order was sent. The Hwasong suddenly stopped firing. Its engines flared to maximum, and it shot forward, not away from the swarm, but through a thinner part of it. As it did, it released a cloud of small, simple probes. The probes immediately began broadcasting massive heat and energy signatures, mimicking a capital ship. The swarm, driven by simple hunger for the biggest energy source, turned and converged on the decoys. The Hwasong, now behind them, opened fire again, hammering them from the rear. The Concord observers were stunned. This was not warfare as they knew it. There was no ritual, no declaration, no attempt at communication. This was a systemic dismantling of a threat. The humans used the swarm's own mindless aggression against it. They used tricks, traps, and overwhelming, focused violence. Their ships took hits. Globs of acid burned into the Bulgox's thick armor, but the armor was layered, designed to be sacrificed. Sections were sealed off and vented into space, the damaged plates burning away. The ship kept fighting. On the Valoran homeworld, in the deep crystalline bunker, Representative Kalin and other survivors watched the sensor feeds. They saw their last defense ships, brave and beautiful, be swallowed by the darkness. Their hope had died. Then they saw the new ships arrive. They were so ugly, so blocky and brutal compared to Valoran design. At first, Kalin felt a new kind of despair. Were these more predators? Then he saw them fight. He saw the Gyeongbokgung stand its ground, a rock against a black tide. He saw the small human fighters perform maneuvers that made his own fragile body ache just to watch. He saw a swarm mothership, a vast, pulsating horror, move toward the planet's surface, ready to drop spores that would dissolve continents. A single human fighter, damaged and trailing smoke, broke away from its pack. It was Tae-shik. He saw the mothership. He saw its trajectory. He knew what it meant. His ammunition was low. His shields were failing. "Command, this is Badger. That big one is heading for the planet. I'm going to scratch its paint." He didn't wait for permission. He pointed the nose of the Badger's den and went to full throttle, not away from the mothership, but straight toward one of its massive, glowing engine vents. He fired his last missiles into the vent, and then, at the last possible second, he ejected. His fighter, now a piloted missile, rammed into the opening and detonated. The mothership's engine flare stuttered, then died. Its course altered, sending it drifting helplessly away from the planet Tae-shik's ejection pod. A tiny capsule spun wildly away from the explosion. He was alive, but adrift in a sea of enemies. On the ground, the situation was dire. A swarm spore had landed near a major crystalline city, disgorging hundreds of skittering dog-sized drones that began dissolving everything: buildings, trees, Valorans with sprays of acid. The Valorans had no defense. They fled, their light dimming with terror. Then a meteor screamed through the atmosphere. It was not a natural one. It was a Terran drop pod. It hit the ground with a craring thump, right between the fleeing Valorans and the advancing swarm drones. The pod hissed open. Sergeant Choi Hannah stepped out. She was encased in powered armor, a bulky, angular suit of gray and black ceramic plating. In her hands was a weapon as wide as her torso, a rotary plasma cannon. She did not hesitate. She stepped forward, the servos in her legs whining, and opened fire. A torrent of superheated blue plasma poured from the barrel. It did not splash against the swarm drones. It vaporized them. Where acid had melted crystal, plasma burned the very ground to glass. She advanced, step by heavy step, her fire never ceasing. Drones tried to flank her. Miniature turrets on her shoulders swiveled and picked them off with sharp cracks of kinetic slugs. A Valoran child, its crystalline form shimmering with pure fear, had been separated from the group and was frozen, staring at a drone that was clacking toward it. Choi Hannah saw it. She turned, her massive armor moving with surprising speed, and placed herself between the child and the drone. The drone sprayed acid. It hit her chest plate, sizzling and smoking, but did not penetrate. She lowered her cannon and crushed the drone under her armored boot with a sickening crunch. She then knelt, the ground shaking slightly. Her helmeted head looked at the terrified child. She reached out a massive, armored hand, not to grab it, but to gently, very gently, usher it behind her toward the other survivors. A translator box on her waist emitted soft, synthesized Valoran tones. "Go, behind me. You are safe now." The child stared up at this giant from the stars, this monster of metal and fire who had just killed 100 horrors to save it. Its fear light slowly began to shift. It was not the warm light of peace. It was the bright, fierce light of awe. Kalen, watching from the bunker feed, felt his own understanding break and reform. These humans were not just another kind of predator. They were protectors. They were violence given a purpose. The darkness had come for his people, and from a darker place still had come an answer. The Deathworlders had not brought more death. They had brought a shield, and the shield was terrifying to behold. The bridge of the Unzi Xiang Bakgong was a place of quiet intensity. It hummed with power, not the gentle hum of Valoran crystals, but the deep, vibrating thrum of fusion reactors and heavy machinery. The lights were soft, casting a glow on surfaces of gray steel and smooth black consoles. Captain Park Ji-hoon stood before the main viewer, his hands clasped behind his back. On the screen was not the star-streaked blue of warp travel, but a tactical hologram. Fed by the desperate data from the Valoran system, Commander Lee Soo-jin stood beside him, her eyes scanning the streams of information. "The swarm's pattern is now clear, Captain," she said, her voice calm and even. "They move in a coordinated wave. They don't fight ships. They envelop them. Their vessels secrete a powerful bioacid. They don't use energy weapons. They consume. They break down everything metal, energy, organic matter into base components to fuel their reproduction." She pulled up a short, horrific clip from the last Valoran transmission. A beautiful, needle-like Valoran ship fired brilliant lances of light at a swarm vessel. The lights splashed against a dark, chitinous hull and did nothing. Then the swarm ship unfolded like a terrible flower wrapped around the Valoran vessel, and dissolved it into a cloud of glittering dust in moments. "It's a von Neumann nightmare," Sujin continued. "Attack, harvest, replicate. They don't communicate. They don't negotiate. They don't have a culture. They are just hunger." Ji-hoon nodded slowly. He was a man who had seen conflict, but his face showed no anger, only a deep, focused concentration. "And the Valorans themselves?" He asked. Su-Jin called up their profile. Images of their crystalline cities, their art, their peaceful gatherings. "Their technology is advanced in many ways, but it's all built for peace. Their strongest energy projector is for moving asteroids for mining. Their ship shields are designed to deflect micrometeors. They have no concept of directed warfare. Their entire history has no record of a large-scale conflict." She looked at him. "Sending them against a swarm is like sending a master musician to stop a collapsing dam with a violin." Down in the main fighter hangar, the air smelled of ozone, engine fuel, and sweat. The pilots of Reaper Squadron were doing final checks on their craft. The fighters were not sleek or beautiful. They were angular, armored like beetles, with multiple weapon pods. They were built to survive. Major Kim Tae-shik, strapped into the cockpit of his fighter, the Badger's Den, ran a gloved hand over a familiar control panel. His wingman, Lieutenant Park Min-ji, was doing the same in the fighter beside him, the Swift Fox. "You see the specs on these swarm things, Min-ji?" Tae-shik said over their private com channel, a grin in his voice. "I saw," Min-ji replied, her voice cooler but no less eager. "No shields. Just thick organic armor. They think that's enough." Tae-shik chuckled. "They've never met a tungsten penetrator going at a fraction of light speed. Or a focused plasma torch." He cracked his neck, a loud pop heard in his cockpit. "It's nice of the universe to finally send us an invitation to a real fight. Gets boring beating our own simulations." The Terran fleet was small. Just 4 ships. The flagship Gyeongbokgung, a battle carrier. The destroyer Bulgaksa. The artillery cruiser Hwasong. And the logistics carrier Jurison. They were not part of a grand galactic armada. They were Earth's first response flotilla. Their mission was simple. Go to the coordinates of a distress call and render aid. The aid was defined by what was needed to the few galactic Concord probes that had ever ventured near Earth's system. Humans were a terrifying mystery. Their world was classified as Deathworld 12, the highest danger rating. Its gravity was crushing compared to galactic standard. Its atmosphere was a corrosive mix that would burn the lungs of most species. It had weather that could scour stone, predators that never stopped evolving to kill, and the tectonic plates that shifted with violent rage. The humans who evolved there were, by all logical measures, monsters. Their bones were dense enough to be considered lightweight stone. Their musculature was freakishly powerful for their size. Their biochemistry was so hostile, it made their blood toxic to most microbes. Their nervous systems were wired for constant, subconscious threat assessment, a leftover from a world where a rustle in the grass could mean death. They were creatures of extreme violence who had also perfected cooperation. They were the ultimate paradox, a pack-bonding predator. The Concord file, had Captain Park read it, would have called them biologically unsustainable. He would have agreed. Then he would have pointed to the billions of people living on Earth and the millions more on its colonies. Sustainability, humans had learned, was not a gift from the universe. It was something you took and fought for every single day. On the Gyeongbokgung's command deck, Ji-hoon gave the order. Drop to sublight in 10. All hands battle stations. This is not a drill. Remember the mission. Protect the Valoran civilian population. Eliminate the swarm threat. We are the first human faces they will see. Let's show them our best side. The humor was dry, but it echoed through the ship. It was their way. The warp bubble collapsed. The stars on the main viewer snapped back into their proper, steady positions. And the scene that greeted them was not a hologram anymore. It was real. The Valoran system was a disaster. The space near the green-blue gem of the homeworld was littered with the glittering, beautiful fragments of shattered crystal stations. The few remaining Valoran ships, elegant and hopeless, were making desperate, weaving attacks against the dark tide of the swarm. It was like watching a flock of glowing butterflies try to fight a forest fire. The swarm itself was worse than the Kong, data suggested. The ships were irregular, asymmetrical, like cancerous growths with no two alike. They pulsed with a sickly internal light. They moved in a way that was deeply wrong, not flying, but swimming through the vacuum. And there were thousands of them. For a long moment, there was silence on the bridge of the Gongbakong. The crew saw the scale of the horror. They saw the doomed bravery of the Valorans. Commander Su-jin broke the silence, her voice now sharp as a blade. Swarm vessels are turning from their engagement with the Valoran remnants. They've detected us. A significant force is breaking off and moving to intercept. Estimated contact in 90 seconds. Captain Park Ji-hoon did not hesitate. He did not hail the swarm. He did not issue a challenge. He leaned forward slightly, his eyes fixed on the approaching wall of horror. "All ships," he said, his voice clear and calm in the stillness. "Weapons free. Engage at will. Reaper Squadron, launch. Your priority is to break through and prevent any swarmlanders from reaching the planet's surface. Show them what a real predator looks like." In the hangar, the launch sequence lights turned green. Tae-shik felt his fighter catapult forward, shooting out into the cold, chaotic dark. His targeting system came alive, painting 100, 1,000 hostile red icons on his screen. He saw the sheer, overwhelming number. He wasn't afraid. He was, for the first time in a long time, perfectly focused. This was the darkness they had always trained for. This was the monster in the void. "All right, you ugly bugs." Kim Tae-shik whispered to the void, his hands steady on the controls. "Welcome to the food chain." Without heading, the great listening post floated in the silent ocean of space. It was a delicate structure of silver and crystal, built by the Valoran people. Its only job was to listen. For centuries, it had heard only the peaceful hum of the universe, the songs of distant stars, the whisper of solar winds, the faint musical chatter of other peaceful civilizations. The Valorans were artists, philosophers, and gardeners. Their world was gentle, with low gravity and soft light. They could not imagine violence. Then the sound changed out first. It was a distortion at the edge of their sensors, like a static cough. Then it became a low, grinding hum that made the listening post's crystal structures vibrate with discomfort. Finally, the sound resolved into signals. But they were not words or music. They were screams. Panicked, truncated bursts of data from the outer colonies in the Valora system, followed by a terrible silence on the Valoran homeworld. In a beautiful city that seemed grown from amethyst and pearl, the ruling Harmony Council gathered. Their bodies were slender, with skin like polished stone that shimmered with their emotions. Fear made their light flicker a sickly green. A young communications technician, whose name was Ellen, projected the sensor data into the center of the chamber. A holographic star map appeared. From the edge of their system, a dark cloud was moving inward. It consumed the light from the stars behind it. As it moved, the signals from the colonies and outposts blinked out, one by one. "What is it?" asked Council Elder Kalen, his voice a soft chime. "We do not know." "Elder," Ellen replied, her light pulsing with anxiety. "It moves with purpose. It destroys everything it touches. Our outposts. There are no life signs. They are just gone." The council was silent. They had no military. Their ships were for travel and trade, sleek and fast, with tools to move asteroids or communicate. They had no weapons. The concept of war was a sad story from the ancient past, a legend of a time before harmony. "We must ask for help," Elder Kalen finally said, his light dimming with the weight of the decision. The idea was shocking. The Valorans were private, content in their quiet corner of the galaxy. But the dark cloud was now visible to their telescopes. It was a swarm of jagged, organic-looking ships, moving like a plague of locusts toward their beautiful, crystalline world dot. So they sent out a message. It was not a declaration or a threat. It was a plea, a raw, open cry of fear and hope. They broadcast it on every frequency, in every translation code they possessed. They sent pictures of their world, their people, their art. They sent the terrifying sensor logs of the approaching swarm. They sent their fear. To any who hear this, we are the Valoran people of the Valora system. We are peaceful. We are in great danger. A force of destruction approaches our world. It consumes all. We cannot stop it. We do not know how. We beg you, in the name of compassion, in the name of life, help us. Please. We are afraid. The message raced out into the darkness at the speed of light dot in the wider galaxy. The message was heard. The Galactic Concord was a loose alliance of spacefaring species. They heard the Valoran cry in their council chambers and listening posts. The Concord members were advanced, wise, and mostly peaceful themselves. They felt a deep pity for the Valorans. A holographic meeting was called. Representatives of a dozen species appeared, the graceful, plant-like Silvari, the logical, insectoid Cathar, the ancient, slow-moving stone singers. "The Valoran distress signal is confirmed," said the Silvari representative, her leaf-like fronds trembling. "The Devourer swarm has entered their system. This is the same entity that consumed the Tranki and the Hessa." A wave of sorrowful light and sound moved through the assembly. The Devourer swarm was a nightmare. It was not a civilization. It was a hunger. It traveled from system to system, stripping planets of all resources, all life, all energy. It left behind cold, dead rocks. Can the Concord fleet respond? Elder Kellen's image asked, his voice thin with hope. The Stone Singer representative made a low, grinding sound of regret. "Our nearest battle group is 40 cycles away at maximum warp. The Valoran world will be gone in 10. We cannot reach you in time." The truth was a physical blow to the Valorans watching. Their light almost guttered out. There was no hope. Is there no one? Kellen's voice was a whisper now. No species with the strength or the will to face such darkness? Must we simply cease to be? The council was silent. Each species looked at their own limitations. They were builders, thinkers, explorers. The Silvari could not fight. The Kaithar's logic saw the tactical impossibility. The Stone Singers moved too slowly. The horror of the swarm was not just its power, but its speed. It preyed on the gentle dot as the meeting lapsed into a mournful silence. Something happened in the communication stream. A new signal was detected, not on the main Concord channels, but on a primitive, powerful bandwidth. It was a tight beam, focused transmission, rough and full of static. Like a shout from a great distance dot, it bypassed the normal protocols and appeared as raw audio in the council chamber. The voice was deep, distorted, and spoke in a language the universal translator struggled with for a millisecond before resolving it. It said only 6 words. Crackling with the strain of interstellar distance. Signal received. Stand by. Help is coming. Then it was gone. The council was stunned. Who was that? The signal's origin point was calculated. It came from a distant, unexplored sector. The star was listed in databases with a simple, old classification. The linguistic tag on the signal was identified. Pulling from the deepest archives, the tag read, Terran. Sol system. A Cathar representative clicked its mandibles in confusion, pulling up the scant data on Terrans. The file was ancient, a biological survey from a long-forgotten probe. The planet was listed. The data was alarming. Planet designation, Sol 3, local name, Earth, gravity, high, atmosphere, corrosive oxygen-nitrogen mix, climate, volatile and extreme. Planetary classification, Death World, class 12, fauna, flora, hyper-aggressive, ecosystem, constant high-stress competition, dominant species, human, physiological notes, extreme durability, redundant organ systems, potent adrenal response, remarkable pain tolerance. Psychological profile, not recommended for contact. Exhibits high levels of territorial aggression and pack-bonding behavior. Survival instinct is paramount. Caution, extreme. The council members looked at each other. A death world? The dominant species was the monster from a nightmare planet? They were answering the call? Elder Kalen, his light faint, spoke for all of them. What have we done? The message replayed in his mind. Help is coming. But from the data, it seemed they had not called for helpers. They had called for predators. They had cried into the darkness for a savior, and something from the darkest, hardest place imaginable had answered. The Valorans waited. The Concord watched. And on the other side of known space, in a star system labeled with warnings, humanity heard a cry it understood all too well, the cry of the prey. And it began to move.